The following is an extract from The Assistant, the fourth in my serial Strange Happenings. Constance was about to age out of the orphanage when Dr. Prendergast offered her a job in a home. She jumps at the chance for stability. Together in an isolated townhouse, they work on a secret biomedical project, including creating mechanical limbs, lungs, and hearts. Constance believes the eccentric woman is working for the greater good. The following months flew by. Most mornings after breakfast, we headed down to the lab. I would work on the mechanical hearts, tinkering away. I loved my job. It reminded me of building toys for Lucille, but with an even greater purpose. We'd break for lunch, though often the doctor would shoo me out of the lab so she could keep working. I wouldn't see the doctor again until our regular tea time and at dinner. I felt guilty eating my lunch alone, but as much as I wanted to keep working too, I was so tired. No matter how much I slept at night, I never felt fully refreshed in the morning. I was grateful the quality of my craftsmanship never suffered. 6 months in as Dr. Prendergast's assistant, I finished a working mechanical heart. When I presented the completed model to her at our daily tea, her lips curved into a wide grin. It's perfect. I'll bring it to the grant meeting tomorrow. You finally have an investor? My pulse quickened. She poured tea, stirred in the sugar, and slid it over to me. Something like that. I'll be gone most of the day tomorrow, I expect. Why don't you take tomorrow off and rest? You don't want me to come with you? I was devastated. It's not that I don't want you there. Dr. Prendergast pursed her lips. How do I put this? She steepled her fingers. I know how brilliant you are. Never forget that. But in the eyes of the investors, you are still a child. It would be best for the project if we appear to be as professional as possible. I guess. I will make sure your name is on the patent paperwork. Dr. Prendergast smiled. Don't you want what's best for the project? Yes. Hope blossomed in my chest. Good girl. Now drink your tea before it gets cold. As I sipped my tea, Dr. Prendergast chuckled to herself. It was such an odd thing for her to do that I blurted, What is it? The doctor shook her head, smiling slightly. I can't believe my good fortune. I finally have a competent assistant. You're the first one to exceed my expectations. Oh. I allowed myself a small smile, but I lowered my gaze. I didn't want the doctor to think I was conceited. I went back to drinking my tea until a question gnawed at me. If you don't mind me asking, what happened to your other assistants? I absently swirled the cream in my tea. Dr. Prendergast waved her hand dismissively. Let me think. She counted off on her fingers. Eloped, with child, new job, carriage accident, and sanatorium. The latter had a weak constitution, I'm afraid. She took a sip of tea. I've heard he's made a full recovery and moved to the country. Oh, I'm sorry he had difficulties. I took a drink of my tea, unsure of how else to respond. That was quite a list. Dr. Prendergast shook her head. It sounds much more dramatic than it really was, I assure you. I'm grateful you are made of sterner stuff, but we should let the past rest. We need to prepare for tomorrow. With that, the conversation was closed, and Dr. Prendergast never mentioned her past assistants again. The flurry of activity to pack up everything the doctor would need for the meeting lasted late into the night, and I went to bed with aching muscles. I found myself thankful for a day off tomorrow. Maybe I would finally get the rest I needed. The next day, Dr. Prendergast came home at mid-morning. I was reading in the parlor when she opened the door and slammed it shut, rattling the distinguished portraits on the wall. She stormed into the house, throwing the steamer trunk on the floor. I dropped my translated copy of De Mineralibus in shock. What happened? I meekly asked, hardly daring to peek at the doctor as I scooped my book. What happened? More appropriate to ask what didn't happen, she fumed. She threw off her cloak and paced. She swore several times under her breath before turning to face me. The board denied us the grant. We have no funding. Well, can we go to a bank? Maybe we'd have better luck with a loan. I kept my tone soft, not wanting to further enrage the doctor. I'd never seen her so angry. I highly doubt it. She took a deep breath. When I told them I needed bodies for test subjects after the board finished ridiculing my findings, they threatened to summon a constable. Dr. Prendergast shook her head. I tried to tell them I didn't need live subjects for the heart or lung transplant. We'd use cadavers. My jaw dropped. What are you talking about? Bodies? Dr. Prendergast rolled her eyes. How on earth did you think we would test out your heart or the lungs? We need subjects. It's no different from what students use at biomedical schools. Yes, I suppose. Doubt crept into my voice. Why didn't the board see it that way? Because they are small-minded fools, Dr. Prendergast snorted. The ticking of the cuckoo clock filled the silence between us. Finally, I asked, but even if we got the cadavers, how would we know if the heart or lungs worked? They're dead. Dr. Prendergast's expression flickered with an emotion I couldn't name before she schooled herself to a more stoic appearance. We come up with something. We have to start somewhere. There's always galvanism, I suppose. I shuddered. I remember reading about Mr. Galvani's electrical experiments on dead frogs. The illustrations of its twitching legs were grotesque. Of all my readings, his experiments disturbed me the most. I had nightmares for weeks after I first read about them. Anyway, the doctor pressed on, we could always get bodies the way the medical colleges do. Buy them? I asked dubiously. Well, yes, or dig them up, Dr. Prendergast shrugged. The blood drained from my face. I trembled, clenching my fists. Never. Dr. Prendergast sneered. Really? Never? Do you hear yourself, girl? Use your head instead of your heart for once. It's morally reprehensible. I threw my hands up in disbelief. So is letting humanity continue to suffer. Our work could save so many lives. We only need to test our devices on a few bodies. I shook my head. We need to get their families' permission or buy cadavers through the proper channels. We can't let our work become corrupted by our methods. Dr. Prendergast stared at me. The cuckoo clock announced the top of the hour with a trilling melody. She sighed. Fine, we'll do it your way. Eventually, you'll see why it won't work. It'll work. My voice had more confidence in it than I felt. Let's drink some tea and put this fight behind us. Today has been difficult enough. Dr. Prendergast left for the kitchen. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. From the kitchen, I heard the doctor mutter, "You're a fool if you think the universities only use legally obtained bodies." My heart sank. The next few weeks were tense. We continued our work in the lab, but Dr. Prendergast was often sullen as she buried herself in her chemistry experiment. Most days she skipped our tea time and sometimes even missed dinner. I threw myself into perfecting the mechanical heart. It was ticking flawlessly now. I wanted to reduce its weight so it would equal the mass of an actual heart. The work gave me much needed solace. One day, an unfamiliar cloying scent wafted from Dr. Prendergast's private study in the lab. I gagged into my handkerchief. My hacking turned into a coughing fit and I doubled over. My legs trembled as I used the workbench to prop myself up. When I mustered my strength, I limped over to Dr. Prendergast's door and knocked weakly. I fell forward when she opened the door. The smell of burning flesh joined with the sickly sweet mystery scent, overpowering my senses. I hacked into my handkerchief. May I help you? I'm in the middle of an experiment. A black leather mask covering Dr. Prendergast's mouth and nose muffled her voice. I can't breathe. What's that smell? I wheezed. Oh, it must be the formaldehyde. She waved her hand. My experiment is nearly complete. Over her shoulder, I spied her experiment. My eyes widened. She had a dead frog resting on a small platform on her desk, along with a generator. Its corpse was being shocked repeatedly, causing it to twitch and flop in place. You're duplicating Galvani's experiment? Why? Dr. Prendergast tisked. No, I'm improving it. Look. With growing dread, I stepped into her study. The poor frog's darkened veins were visible through its translucent skin. She had prepared a makeshift blood transfusion with clear, narrow hoses going between the corpse and a vial of black-red fluid. An arcane symbol in front of a red tear-shaped blood drop was etched into the vial. What is this? My body was weakening. I could barely stand, but I couldn't take my eyes off the frog. I've done it. I've combined the fields of chemistry with its predecessor, alchemy. I don't understand. My brain was foggy. Nothing felt real. Just watch. The generator shocked the dormant frog. It convulsed, twisting violently. Its skin bubbled and popped as muscles expanded rapidly. The generator short-circuited and sparked before going silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. The frog croaked, its voice distorted and warbling. My heart skipped several beats as I staggered closer. Its baleful eyes locked with mine. Why? I trembled, cold sweat beating across my forehead. You said it yourself. We need to test if the lungs and heart will work on a cadaver. Dr. Prendergast pointed at the frog. It's crude, but it's progress. I had to stop to catch my breath. It was becoming more labored by the second. My heart palpitated. You told me we didn't have any money to buy a cadaver. And that's still true. I turned around, trying with all my willpower not to collapse. Dr. Prendergast's clinical gaze was on me. I'm astounded you've lasted as long as you have. By rights, you should have been dead by now. I don't think it'll be much longer, though. You're looking awfully pale. Rage and sorrow burned in my failing heart. Why? I did everything I could to help you. I could feel my heart spasming, fighting to keep pumping. It felt ready to burst. Not everything, girl. You showed so much promise. Oh well, you'll still aid my research, even if it's not the way I intended. I lurched forward, fist raised. I took 2 steps before I stumbled and fell. Dr. Prendergast caught me. She slowly lowered me to the floor, kneeling as she held my head in her lap. Sobs racked my body. Not like this. I could barely speak. It'll be over soon. Dr. Prendergast stroked my hair, tucking it behind my ear. A distant part of my conscience wondered at the gesture. I closed my eyes. Everything stopped. I woke with a scream ripping from my throat. The scent of formaldehyde invaded my senses, scorching pain everywhere. Well, not everywhere. I couldn't feel my arms or legs. Dr. Prendergast's curious visage came into view. She was speaking, but I couldn't hear. The words were muffled. I thought she said, "You're alive?" And that's the end of that.